LGBTQ activists in India vow to fight on. The Supreme Court has declined to legalise same-sex marriage. The judges left the issue to Parliament to decide, but the government is opposed to any sort of gay unions. The court also ruled same-sex couples do not have the right to adopt children. Still, it accepted the state's offer to set up a panel to consider rights like joint bank accounts and pensions. Some say the offer is hollow. Who'll sit on the panel and where's the timeline? Here are some voices.
I had hope before the judgment. I still have hope after the judgment that we will go in a direction where ultimately the rights do come. Of course, it wasn't in the judgment directly, but I do have hope in the country, the people, the laws, that one day the day will come where same-sex marriage is also allowed.
Obviously, the government is not going to do anything for the queer movement, or rather, queer folks, is because the largest voter bank that votes for the current government is the very, extremist Hindu right wing.
The ball is in the government's court. And we have seen for decades, most government committees take for...
And we're joined by a petitioner in the case, Mario da Peña. What went wrong? You were in court yesterday.
Thank you, Ben, for having me on the air. I was in court yesterday, and I am one of the many petitioners in this case. It was a disappointing judgment for the entire queer community here in India. Essentially, what seems to have happened is that the five judges completely abdicated responsibility for ensuring the rights of queer people, for ensuring marriage equality to the queer community. And they seemed to have said that it is the prerogative of Parliament to give us these rights, if at all. However, there was both a majority judgment of three learned judges and a minority judgment of two judges. The minority judgment suggested that perhaps not marriage, but civil unions were the way to go. The majority judgment suggested that while it was the prerogative of Parliament to adjudicate on matters regarding the relationships between queer people, it was certainly not mandatory for Parliament to take this up. Without a mandate to Parliament, without any pressure from the Supreme Court upon Parliament to bring in some kind of legislation that would deal with the everyday realities of queer people in India, I don't see the prospect of any legislation, any marriage equality, or even civil unions as very bright, just because there is no pressure. I would remind us all of the transgender law that came about in India in 2019. And that came 5 years after a Supreme Court directive to the government that a law of this kind must be enacted. The government certainly took its time with enacting the law, and not everybody was happy with it in the end. But if those are the timelines that the government takes when it comes to the queer community, I have very little hope about the enactment of any kind of civil union law or let alone marriage equality.
Okay, Mario, if I can jump in there, are you saying that society is also not quite ready for this yet in India?
I'm not sure if society isn't ready for it. Throughout the case, there were many polls done, and there has always been a widespread support for queer people in India. But I do think that in the way that the queer community really came together and made a case with the Indian people to decriminalize us over 20 long years in the early 2000s, at the end of which we reached decriminalization finally in 2018 through a Supreme Court judgment. The kind of work that we did perhaps has not happened in the same way with marriage equality. I do think we have some way to go, but it is a battle of hearts and minds at the end of the day. And I do think in the end, we will be able to convince the Indian people of the need for our rights to be recognized. But at the same time, I would like to say that civil rights should really never be left to a referendum of how the majority community in any country feels.
Because we're talking about a minority here, aren't we?
We certainly are. And, if we were to leave civil rights constantly to majoritarian wills, then we would really fall short of the kind of democratic ideals that we pride ourselves on in India. But having said that, I do think it is important to have those conversations with the Indian people, and I believe we can and will do that.
This conversation and this discussion is being held publicly. That's a great step forward. Mario De Pena, thanks for talking to us today.